Good morning, Facebook and YouTube and Google Plus. No, wait, that would be like Robin Williams movie. Or yeah, Good Mystical Morning. No, wait, no, that's some other YouTube channel. Oh, geez, what the hell? Wandering Pilgrims. Why do you think we're always wondering? We don't have a clue how to even start the show. Never mind figuring out all this religious stuff. But I will tell you this much: I get really impatient with people that are irrationally dismissive. And by irrationally dismissive, I mean like when, okay, say you obviously know more about a certain subject than someone like, say you used to be a commercial airline pilot, and you're having a discussion about airline subsidies and all that stuff, and these people are start talking about how the pilots are in on it and how they, you know, they're part of the problem. And then you pipe in and say something to the effect of, well, I was an airline pilot and that's not how it is. And then that other person's just like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're biased. You know, you got an agenda. You know, you're sticking up for your fellow airline pilots. You're sticking up for the industry. All of that stuff. I don't know. It's probably a pretty bad illustration, but I mean, I think you get what I'm talking about. People who are arrogant for absolutely no reason at all, other than that it serves to resolve their cognitive dissonance in their own minds, which shows how weak-minded they really are. Yeah, I know I'm being kind of harsh, especially since I'm going to be specific about the names of the people. But man, they called Johanan a jackass and hung up on him just because he talked about hearing the voice of God. And he didn't even say that he did hear the voice of God. He's just talking about the possibility, which I think he was going there eventually. But suffice it to say, he didn't get there. And Matt Dillahunty was just like, hang up on this jackass. It's like, seriously, guys? Really? I mean, this is what Nu Atheism has become, where now I'll get to my psychological analysis later, but it seems to me there is such a hostility, yet at the same time they realize on some level that to be too passionate about this is to kind of imply that there's something there to be passionate about. How do I word this? It's almost like they're affirming that there might be something to it if they're really that wrapped up in it, if they're really that obsessed with it. So what it really comes down to with them is you can't even have this entrance into taking it seriously. Otherwise, you lead down a path where they could possibly lose the rationality game. Because, look, here's the thing. And I think most honest seekers get to a point in their lives where they realize this one pivotal truth. And the reality of this truth is really crafting the way that I engage people a lot lately. And that one truth is ultimately we choose to believe what we believe, and we don't know why. And at the end of the day, we have to make peace with this fact. This isn't just an idea. This is a fact, okay? And if you doubt this, then you have no hope of actually addressing it. Your beliefs are arbitrary. I didn't say they were capricious, and I didn't say that they were random. I didn't say that they were irrational, but everyone's belief system has a degree of arbitrariness, if that's even an English word. There's a volitional aspect to our chosen cognition where we geez, you got to get into information theory and things like that. But rather than get too complex, all I want to say is that we don't even know how our brains or how our psychology really wrestles with truth. I mean, ultimately speaking, without getting too far off topic, reality is not as straightforward as we assume. And even a casual glance at the history of philosophy quickly peels back that layer of self-delusion that, you know, reality is just straightforward and it's what's right in front of our face. It's like, no, I think successful people, to a degree, arrive at a certain pragmatic understanding of reality, which serves them well, according to whatever purpose they arrive upon. But I think most people that I don't know, that really think at all about purpose and their place in the world and what it's all about. I think there comes a point where we all realize that, I don't know, we all just realize that we don't even know how we got here. And by how we got here, I mean, like, we don't know how we got here as a species. We don't know how we got here as a culture. We don't know how we got here as an individual. We just have a lot of ideas that we seem to be able to confirm with evidence and investigation. But ultimately speaking, it's all a conceptualization. Our idea of our own entomology is all conceptualizations. And when you begin interacting with these, when two or more people begin interacting with these ideas, you begin to realize, wow, they see reality very, very differently than I do. So, yeah, I'll get back to Mr. Dillahunty and was it Jen Peeples? It's the arrogant hubris of them that I know this little babbling is a bit off topic, but what I'm trying to get to is the most wise people, the most intelligent people have a humility when approaching the issue of supernaturalism or physicalism or religion and God and all of these things. I've known a lot of very, very intelligent atheists who say that they're just convinced that there's not a God, that they're just convinced that there's not a God, but that they understand that they could be wrong. I don't think that Matt and Jen understand that they could be wrong. They might give lip service to that idea, knowing that they have to in order to maintain any perceived level of intellectual integrity with their audience. But I think those of us who've been around a little bit and know people and have dealt with people like this, I think that it's pretty beyond doubt, and it's pretty obvious that Matt and Jen think that they know all that they need to know on the issue, and their job in the world is to knock everyone off their pedestal who thinks that they can tell them otherwise. And they're right. You know, they're right. No one can tell them otherwise, but not because that they're so established, not because they've really like concretely established this with a solid line of reasoning or anything. The only reason is because they've chosen to dig their heels into the mud, which I guess most of us do. The whole premise of this show is pulling our heels out of the mud, really. I love what David Michael Gregg said to me one time. It really sparked a lot of deep, deep thought in my own personal time. He said that, and I'm badly paraphrasing, so please, David, correct me if I get this wrong, but that you almost have to be an atheist before you can be a genuine theist. And my own interpretation of that, where it brought my thinking, is that if you're too afraid to consider that there might be no God, usually out of fear of hell or something like that, you know, because doubt is a sin. So if you're too afraid to really entertain the notion that there may not be a God, then how can you really say that you've made a choice? It's a de facto default, just, you know, well, I'm not even gonna consider it. I remember before my stepbrother died, Jesse, he this was probably, I want to say 5-6 years ago. Actually, no, it was even longer than that because my grandfather was still alive too. So probably like 7-8 years ago. I went down to West Virginia, and him and I went out shooting up in the backwoods, and it was really cool because I was shooting a 7mm sniper rifle. Damn, that thing about took my shoulder out from me. But I asked him, I'm like, you don't seem really religious. You know, we grew up together and stuff, and he always hated church. My grandfather used to drag us relentlessly, and I was the only one who actually looked forward to going. And Jesse he was always you know, fidgeting. He was always yawning. He could never remember what the sermon was about. It just wasn't his thing. So I kind of always thought of him as being kind of irreligious, but at the same time, I guess it's changing nowadays, but for the most part in the Bible Belt, and I know West Virginia is just on the fringe, but I consider that part of the Bible Belt. It's like being born in a Muslim country. You are default Christian, and so I asked him when we were shooting. I'm like, so I mean, do you really believe in God? I mean, do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? And he's like, I don't know, I guess. And I'm like, well, it's not one of those things you can really be ambivalent about. I mean, you can like admit to ignorance, but you can't just say, yeah, sure, I'll believe that. It has some pretty huge implications for your life. And he's like, well, I look at it this way. If I die and I'm wrong, well, it's not like I'm missing out on anything because I cease to exist. You know, I won't be there. But I'll have lived a life, you know, where religion fulfilled me. And but if I die and I'm right, well, then I made the right choice. And I don't know, I kind of wish that I would have pursued the conversation with him, especially given the fact that, well, now he knows one way or the other, he knows, or whichever. But it makes me wonder if he's listening to this right now, what his thoughts are. He's probably laughing pretty heartily. But yeah, I really miss my brother. But it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work like that. And Jesus has mercy. God has mercy. He knows what people are dealing with. You think of Emmet at the end of the final battle, or the last battle, the last of the Chronicles of Narnia. Emmet, that Calormany soldier who you know, was devoted to Tash his whole life, and found out that he belonged to Aslan. It's like, well, no good deed can truly be done in the name of anyone other than the good God, and no evil deed can truly be done in his name. It's a farce. It's an illusion. So I just knowing Jesse the way I know him, I can't help but think that he knew Jesus. But man, it's just too much confusion, you know. And in today's world, there's so many. I guess it comes down to what Aldous Huxley had feared in A Brave New World. The kind of like the opposite of 1984, where George Orwell feared the control of information and the whittling down of the information, newspeak, and all that stuff. Aldous Huxley feared information overload. That's the way to hide things, is to just throw so much misinformation out there that sifting through it is next to impossible. And we're seeing that on the internet. You know, I've taken my stance on global warming. I know that, but see, I'm not as arrogant as people think. I know that I could be wrong. Hell, maybe man is causing global warming. It really wouldn't be that much of a surprise to me. I just really don't think that it is. It doesn't matter to me, because I know that I'm one person, and I don't think that I have any level of control over this whatsoever. Ultimately speaking, I got my own backyard to worry about, and when everyone's always whining about green this and earth friendly that, when all I'm doing is tossing a gum wrapper on the ground, it's like I get really irritated with this obsessiveness. But anyway, I digress. The point is, we honest people are doing the best they can to figure out their world around them, and that's why the story keeps getting revised. I mean, it's like a child figuring out the world. Obviously, I mean, there's stepping stones to understanding. You know, when we were really young and water was coming out of the sky, there were stepping stones to understand what was going on there. We didn't instantly understand the water cycle and evaporation and condensation and molecules and atoms and quarks and quantum physics and 0-point fields. No, we didn't start with an exhaustive knowledge. We just explored with what was at hand and dug deeper and deeper and deeper. Pardon me. We dug deeper and deeper and deeper, as far as both our sensory faculties and rational faculties would allow us. I think I can be reasonably confident of Newtonian physics, you know, just because it works. You know, I tell Michelle all the time, science, in order to be science, has to predict the future. That's the only way a thing can be science. It has to accurately predict the future. That's what the scientific method is all about, making a prediction and testing it. And if your prediction is accurate, bingo, you just did science, maybe. Actually, no, that's not. That's oversimplification, because you can be right on a fluke. All I'm saying is that you're designing experiments to test reasonable hypotheses in order to make an accurate model of prediction. And this works. You know, this is how we have logical consistency. This is how we have GPS satellites and how the world around us works, because of those three basic laws of all logic, of all consistency: the law of contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, and the law of identity. And we arrived at these just by testing it as rational beings. I mean, why? I just don't understand why people take Matt Dillahunty and Jen Peeples seriously, when you can see how obviously irrationally hostile to the very idea that they're seeking to investigate. I mean, this is all it is confirmation bias. You know, the theists want to watch this to see how stupid the atheists are, and the atheists want to see it to watch it to see how stupid the theists are, and both groups see exactly what they want to see. And to a degree, they're both right. Most religious people I know are idiots. They're bad. I remember I was having some issues with the last church that I was at. Some pretty deep issues, some problems with congregation and policies, and there's some disciplinary matters towards me that were taking place. And I screwed up. No doubt about it. I screwed up, but I was telling them, it's like, look, I want to do what's right. I want to, you know, have a clear conscience at the end of the day. But it just seems so confusing, and it seems like no one's really got it figured out. And all I can do is the best that I can do. And that's when one of the elders chimed in. He's like, well, you need to trust us. You need to trust our judgment and trust our counsel and abide by our decisions. And I'm like, guys, I don't think you have any idea just how lowly I view Christians. And it's like you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, I was in the presence of three elders, one of whom was the minister of music, minister of music. The other, another one was the youth pastor, and the other one was the assistant pastor. And you could have heard a pin drop. I'm like, my experience with Christians, and this church is no different, is that you guys really don't get much like understanding. You don't try. And I just haven't seen any level of rationality that I would put my life decisions in your hands. And seeing how irrational you seem to me, it's like, what? How could you ask me to trust you when you've earned everything to the contrary? And I was being sincere. I'm not trying to be hostile towards the church. I've tried my whole life to fit in with the church. You can't, if you really are chasing after Jesus, if you really put him first, I don't see how you can fit into the church. There's just too much they put ahead of Jesus. Too much. And it's too endemic. It's too corrupted. Maybe I'm just jaded and wrong, but I honestly tried, and it wasn't just hostility towards them. It was just this consistent. I mean, being on a worship team is the most maddening experience ever. If you have any level of competence as a musician, any level of integrity as an artist, and any level of understanding as a theologian and a Christian, being on worship teams is like a constant assault to your faith. It's like a constant assault to your intellect. It's a constant assault to your integrity. You're asked to manipulate people. You're asked to feign things, to fake it. You're asked to sing things that you don't believe. You're asked to dumb down your playing and to play things that, to be quite honest with you, sound bad, just because. You know, that's what a particular demographic wants, or a particular elder wants, or a particular older member of the worship team who, if they don't get their way, is going to kick and scream and whine and make everyone's life miserable until they do get their way. See, I have no use for church, because it's like being in daycare with no adults around, only bigger kids claiming to be adults and clobbering those who don't fall in the line. It really is lunacy. And so don't think that I'm like all for, you know, yay Christianity. No, I love Christ. I love the Christ of the Bible. I know the man. He's revealed himself to me. And I don't expect anyone else to accept that. It's a personal experience. You know, all I can do is testify to it, which is what he calls me to do. But the other people who seem to express a similar sentiment, the vast majority of them are liars. They don't love Christ. And I don't care how judgmental that makes me sound. It's pretty apparent. You can tell whether a man loves his wife or not, or a wife loves his man. You know, there might be some affection. They might feel warmly towards one another, but you can see in the choices that they make, that their daily congress with one another. You can tell if there's love there. And with most Christians, it's the fear of hell. That's all it is. With the vast majority of Christians. Oh, wait. Let me backtrack. There's two groups here. Let me talk about two groups. You have the genuinely religious group, and then you have the cultural group. Now, the generally religious group are the ones that are there for fire insurance. They mostly fear hell and fear displeasing a wrathful God, and out of compulsion, you know, they know that they'll be punished for not loving him. And ask any man who's been determined to make a marriage work that just won't work. You can learn to love anybody you want. And that's what Christians do, is they learn to love a God that they secretly hate deep down inside. And the other group, the social group, the cultural group, are there because it's their club. It's their social club. And I think the second group is far more numerous than the first. Most people going to church on Sunday are just doing it because it's their tradition. It's what their family does. So both of these people I see as being rejected by Christ. Perfect love casts out all fear. Okay, that's number one. Yes, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, but that's the beginning, not the end. Okay, the beginning. You need to know who God is and the power he holds over you. And if you don't have a fear reaction to that, we're not talking about the same God. But you don't stay in that fear, because as he reveals himself to you, he shows that he has good plans for you, not bad. And that perfect love casts out perfect fear. That does not happen with most Christians. When they talk about being God-fearing people, what they mean is they're afraid to explore their concept of God, lest God be wrathful. And a lot of times people should be more afraid than what they really are, because I hear a lot of people judging God. If anyone knows me, then they know how that's a real danger zone for me. You can't sit there and start saying, well, and this is a nod to Johanan, him and his little tantrums against God. You can't just sit there and say, if God is such and such, then he's wicked and evil and deserves to burn in hell forever and the most war. And it's like, no, he defines these things, whether you like it or not. Just because he doesn't line up with your concept of good doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means that you don't know what good is. And I don't even have any interest in discussing that with anyone anymore, because you either get that or you don't. It's not something that you can really explain. So back again to the amazing atheists. And Johanan's going on about quantum physics and entangled information, and it's all highly jargon laced. So you can tell obviously that he's losing them. I don't think Jen, I mean, I think at first Jen was trying to grapple with it, but rather than come to terms with her own limitations, she just, how can I characterize it? The look on her face was almost just like, this stupid kid thinks that science actually matters. You know, it's like, oh, you people. Oh, so all in all, their dismissiveness, their refusal to even try to understand. I understand how people can zone out Johanan, because being at the high level of quantum physics that he is, it's pretty hard for him to put it on the lower shelf. I'm nowhere near as knowledgeable as Johanan, nor am I as good with the subject matter as he is. So I think if I can begin to grasp it, I think I'm probably more qualified to put it on the lower shelf. Excuse me. So, if I could give a brief explanation of what Johanan's trying to say, and if you want to hear it in his own words, I think his video through a mirror darkly really touches upon this to a great degree. I mean, he's spread out a lot of his videos, and but anyway, here goes. I can prove my mind exists, just the same way that Descartes proved that the one thing he could know is that, you know, because he is thinking, he must be. He must be. Cogito ergo sum. I am thinking, therefore I must be. It doesn't get more axiomatic than that. If we're going to challenge that, then we can't really move forward, because in order to arrive at any understanding, we need to understand that there's a person here to have understanding. I mean, I hate to have to explain this, but there are some people out there who would say, well, I think, you know what? I think maybe Craig Weinberg and Jack Sinclair. I would like to hear what they'd have to say about that, because I bet you that they would take it on themselves just for shits and giggles to build an argument to deny the existence of the self. I bet you those two people would, and I'd be interested to hear it. But regardless, we know that we exist. I know that I exist, obviously, because there's a person there to know it, and I'm feeling it, and you know, nothing doesn't feel something. So if I know that I exist, I know that I have cognition, then I exist first and foremost as a mind. When I say I, am I talking about my finger? Am I even talking about my whole body? No, I'm talking about that intangible aspect of myself that animates this body, that sends it in whatever direction it decides to go. There is nothing like Johanan's example of there's no hammer in my head. There's no movement of my body in my head. There's only the conceptualization of it. There's integrated information. So what does he mean by integrated information? It means that you take an idea, say like this cup. Well, this cup is built upon more elementary ideas. For example, the idea of a container, something to hold liquid, the idea of liquid and how liquid behaves, the idea of a handle and how to pick up the cup and how to hold it. And this is very rudimentary. I mean, you can get even deeper where, you know, you talk about the subatomic structure, and you talk about, you know, that it's a form of an idea and things like that. But what we can say is that you can, an idea is a collection of pieces of information that are related, flowing one to another, that form other complex ideas that are then related one to another, much like the neurons in our brain connect one to another. Now, I can only explain this so simplistically if you don't have some kind of understanding about the neural structure of your brain and what your neurons look like. If you don't have some kind of an understanding of basic tenets of philosophy, and if you don't have some kind of understanding of the standard model of physics, then you're only going to be able to get so much. You're only going to be able to go so far in understanding where this conversation is going. And with Jen and Matt Dillahunty, I think that they shouldn't have even engaged in the conversation in the first place. You know, they should have said, well, I'd love to discuss this, but this is just out of my depth. No, they don't have that humility about them. So they proceeded to try to show how stupid Johanan was for even attempting in the first place. But back to what I was saying. So what he's presenting is these ideas, okay, because of their relations to one another, we call that a form of integration. It's integrated information. And Johanan likes to throw the word entanglement around an awful lot. In quantum physics, what entanglement is when two particles are created, or when they are subjected to the same conditions under a certain set of conditions, they become inextricably linked. That it's almost like it's one particle that's in two different places. Okay, just the mirror images. If one has one spin, the other one has -1 spin. You know, if one's up, the other one's down. You know, so it's like this is. Nobody really understands it, but the way I look at it is it's one object being found in two different places, and you're just seeing two sides of that singular object. That's how I see it. Okay, but you need to be an idealist to see it that way. With the standard model, I think most physicists would say that what they think is happening is that the conditions for each of them necessitates the condition for the other, and that they are deterministic, that they're not random, like the uncertainty principle would imply. But regardless, that's entanglement in quantum physics, and Johanan applies that to cognition. That he sees that integrated information, you know, those ideas built from ideas that are interwoven with one another, like the structure of our brain, that integrated information can be said to be entangled in the same way that subatomic particles can be. And he demonstrates this, and this is part of what he's talking about in the video, about how this experiment disrupted this entanglement without affecting any other function of the brain. That there are neurons in the front of your head, neurons in the back of your head, and experimentation seems to indicate that information is shared between those regions faster than the speed of light. In fact, it seems sometimes that the effect preempts the cause. I'm not going to claim to really fully understand all of this. And I think Johanan thinks that he understands more than he really does. No offense, Johanan. I just think that a lot of this stuff, there's an element of mystery here, and there's an element of things being beyond our grasp. And I think, ultimately speaking, yeah, we're growing in leaps and bounds in what we're reaching out to grasp. But I think that sometimes our reach exceeds our grasp, and you know, the bleep mentality that we have going on. For anyone who hasn't seen that, I'm pretty sure everyone who would be watching this knows what I'm talking about. That video with the bleep, you know, down the rabbit hole, all that stuff. That seems to be really in vogue in quantum physics, and that's all great and well. But I'd be perfectly fine with a totally Newtonian world tomorrow. You know, I'm sorry. I'm just not that tied to it, and I'm not as passionate about it as Johanan is. Idealism is not my life. I just think it's a really cool thing. It's fascinating, and I think it best describes the way the universe works. So, brief recap. We have information, which is made up of other information, which is eventually you get down to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and you have these elementary concepts that basically construct the network of all ideas and information that we find in our head. And this information is not only integrated, but it shows, it evidences the behavior of entanglement, of entangled information. And knowing that I can prove that my mind exists, but that I cannot prove that the physical world exists other than by pragmatic experimentation. I mean, really, the evil demon hypothesis kind of blows it all out of the water. How do we know it's not like the Matrix and it's just being fed directly into the brain? How do we know that there's a brain there in the first place? Well, we know because there's something doing some thinking. We know because we can say we can ask ourselves questions and give ourselves answers. But one thing that we cannot do is we cannot say that we know that the brain is anything but a projection of our mind. It's like a which came first, the chicken or the egg. A lot of people will say, well, no, thought is an emergent property of neural activity. Well, come on, that's like such a non sequitur. How do you get that? You know, just because you can see the relationship between two things, the one-to-one correlation, how do you get, well, that means that one causes the other. How do you get a causative relationship there? Like I said, if anything, the causation, the evidence is more on the side for the cognition itself to be the causative agent, not the physical processes, not the chemical processes. So, I mean, how can we say that we know that thought is an emergent property of neural activity, cognition? I mean, we can't. We can say that it's very likely otherwise, though. And that's what Jen and Matt were failing to grasp, is that their whole atheism is based on physicalism. And that's why they kept moving the bar. That's why they kept saying, well, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for me knowing God and all this stuff? And unfortunately, Johanan, you played right into their hands, especially when you came out with the, well, because you can hear him speak. I wouldn't have even have answered their questions in that regard. What my response to them would be, well, what does this mean? I don't know, you tell me. Well, I think what it means more than anything is that your simplistic approach to understanding the world is insufficient at best and deceptive at worst. I think that what this shows, the quantum model of consciousness and idealism and all that stuff, I think what this shows is not only is there more to the world than we realize, but it's there for us to experience if we will reach out there. I wouldn't talk about drugs with them. I wouldn't talk about any kind of transcendent meditation or anything like that. I would talk about expanding consciousness that is a result of a greater understanding of your environment around you. Because you gotta speak in naturalistic terms to naturalists. They're not gonna hear any metaphysical mumbo jumbo. They're just not. So I mean, I don't know where you're at, Johanan. I don't know exactly how you feel about your own metaphysical experience, but for people like Justin and myself, metaphysical reality is more real to us than physical reality. Our experience is very, sometimes it's just weird. That's all I can say. I tell Michelle, you know, it's like I'm only like 10% here, if that. It's like so much of my life is lived in my head. So much is just conceptualizations that defy corporeal visualization. I mean, I don't even really think visually. I know a lot of people think verbally. I don't. If you ask me to repeat something verbatim, I'm gonna have the damnedest time in the world. That's the easiest way to win an argument with me, is to try to get me to repeat something that I said before verbatim. Shh, don't tell anybody. And even other people, I think more intelligent people, don't even necessarily think with words. They think of pictures, maybe even colors and sensations. It's even more abstract than that for me. I have a hard time putting things into words sometimes because there are no words. My thoughts, I'm sure there's some level of abstraction taking place, but by and large, it's not anything that resembles a corporeal experience. It's just pure thought. Which is why I have no problem conceiving of God as simply being. No substance, okay? No substance as such. No structure as such. He simply is. God is. He's not information. I know Johanan and I disagree on this. He's not information, though he can be experienced in an informational way, as a rational being. He's not anything that we want to label him as. He simply is. Now, we could say he's good because we experience something from him, a manifestation of God in this world, and we've learned to call that good. We can experience truth because God, in order to exist, must be consistent in his self-assertion. But I don't know. probably lost anyone who's watching this thus far, so I'll bring it pretty much to a close. And I just want to say my conclusion with Johanan's presentation is presenting God is an impossible task. Presenting the likelihood of God is slightly less impossible. Presenting the possibility of God is even less impossible than that. But proving first that the atheists are in fact making a positive assertion, I know that they were going out of their way. I caught on to that. I don't think you did, actually. And I'm still addressing Johanan, sorry. I caught on to that, that he was continually redirecting that. And, well, anyway, all I can say is that with them, I would say your atheism is contrary to concrete sciences, and that at the very, very least, we know that the universe is first integrated information before it emerges as a corporeal construct. And sticking on that, avoiding the God question altogether, avoiding supernaturalism altogether, and just sticking on that, sticking on the sheer physics of it. Only when that's fully established and you have them affirming it can you move past that point. But otherwise, all you're doing is what I started out this video saying. You know, you're giving a confirmation to those who agree with you, and they're giving a confirmation to those who agree with them. And at the end of the day, we've just found more reasons to laugh at each other. We haven't gotten anywhere. But that's just my opinion. So with that, I will bid the internet world a fair adieu. Thank you for listening to my ramblings, and you know, let me know what you think. Good day. I said good day.